Good evening, everyone. You're in the right place at the right time. This is Coast to Coast AM, blasting out of the Mojave Desert like a Scirocco, blazing across the land, slamming into your radio like a supercharged nanoparticle of unobtainium. Greetings from the boldest, bawdiest, most outrageous city in the world, the planetary capital of sun, fun, sin, sex, and secrets, my not-so-humble hometown, Las Vegas, Nevada. My name is George Knapp, your occasional host, designated driver of the airwaves, and moderator of tonight's upcoming cacophonous cavalcade of conversation. Here in the coast-to-coast command bunker, right on top of this stack of papers in front of me, is the front page of the New York Times, dated Thursday, February 23rd, 2017, just a few days ago. Top of the page, above the fold, as they say in the newspaper business, right under the newspaper logo, is an astonishing reality warping story, illustrated by an artist's rendering of a solar system less than 40 light years from Earth. It's at the center is a dwarf star dubbed TRAPPIST-1, and next to the star, lined up one next to the other, like those clickety-clackety metallic pendulum-type devices you see on people's desks, the orbs that whack each other back and forth, is a likeness of 7 Earth-like planets. All similar in size. 6 of the 7 are in the so-called Goldilocks zone, temperate enough to support life as we know it, and 3 of them may have oceans of liquid water. I bought a copy of the paper to save it, maybe even to frame it. The image is transcendent, and the story, based on a NASA news conference that made news all over the world, is, I guess, in a way, titillating. And I kind of got giddy when I saw this thing and read it, and I'm not really sure why. All sorts of possibilities leap into our minds, don't they? I must have heard it 10 times on Thursday as people got wind of the story. They'd say, well, we need to go there. We need to go to TRAPPIST-1. We need to get out there and take a look, see if anyone else is there. We need to go check that out. It's only 39 light years. Only 39 light years. I guess in a way I was kind of buoyed by this enthusiasm, weren't you? I mean, what is it about that spirit of adventure and discovery that exists in humans, the drive to see what's over the next hill, over the horizon, what's across that ocean, what's beyond that vast chasm of empty space? Why is that? Chances of humans heading that way to TRAPPIST-1 in my lifetime are pretty slim. Maybe yours, but not mine. Even if we could figure out how to get there, or in a more practical way, how to pay for it, in an age when people resent spending anything for anything. Well, it's cool to think about it, right? Tonight we're going to talk about it, but in a vein that's probably different than what you might expect. That image of those 7 planets lined up in a row like pool balls on a billiard table, it's kind of stuck in my pointy little head, and there's something else fighting for space in there. It's the residue of a movie I saw a couple of nights ago. I put off seeing it on purpose, though it drove me crazy to wait. I kind of wanted it to be fresh on my mind for tonight's program. The movie's called Arrival. Many of you have already seen it. It was up for Best Picture tonight at the Oscars. Didn't win, but it's excellent and a very thoughtful movie. It's ostensibly about the arrival of an alien intelligence on Earth. They come in these huge, odd-shaped spacecraft, and they just kind of sit there waiting for us to figure out how to communicate with them. I don't want to give away too much for those of you who have not seen it, but it's a theme that we've talked about hundreds of times on Coast to Coast. What would happen? How would we react? We tell each other we're ready for the truth. We're ready for disclosure. Open up those hangars at Area 51. Let us kick the tires on the recovered alien craft, right? We want to know. We have a right to know. That's what I believed when I started down this road many years ago. Like you, like many of us, having the zeal of a missionary on this topic. We're tired of the lies. We want to know, so tell us. And we wait for disclosure that never comes, and the phenomena goes on about its business. My views have changed since back then, though I'm reluctant to get too preachy about it, so I don't. And as I watched this movie, and I pondered that New York Times story, this mixture of fact and fiction, a theme sort of developed, one that we're going to delve into tonight. It occurred to me that if an alien intelligence has been visiting us, watching us for maybe a long time, and if they've watched us go about our business, they may have decided a long time ago they don't want to officially announce their presence, not so much because of what we might do to them, but because of what we might do to each other. sorry, but I think we would freak out. I think, as in this movie, there's a little references to it that there'd be a run on gun stores and then hoarding of food and everything else, and the markets would crash, and then there'd be demands for action by the military, and then boom. Well, tonight we'll take a ride into some shadowy and grim possibilities. It's going to be a program much different than what I originally had in mind for tonight. It may be different from what Tom DeLonge had in mind when he was here a year ago. It was March of last year when he was here and gave us the broad strokes of this ambitious plan he had in mind. Using his status as a celebrity and rock star, he intended to gain access to the keepers of the secrets, get them to tell their story, even if they had to do it anonymously, indirectly, through him, to explain why things had to be kept secret for so long, what the big picture is, how we all fit in, what comes next. Disclosure, if possible, or something better, confirmation. Well, a lot of things have happened in a year. Tom DeLonge has been in the middle of a maelstrom, a firestorm. He's been trashed and bashed and mangled and whacked from just about every angle. Ufologists especially, but also scientists and military folks, media, random bloggers, instant experts, people who say, yeah, that sounds nice, but it can't be true, and therefore it isn't true. This rock star dude is being led down a path. He's naive. He's being manipulated. No one's going to give him the straight story. And a lot more of that stuff. You know, after our interview last March, Tom got a lot of other media coverage and talked about his plan, and then, boom, it all blew up. WikiLeaks, the Podesta emails, you know that story. And since then, he's generally been unavailable for comment, but not anymore. Tonight, he is here for all 4 hours to talk about what has happened since the last time, the new direction his work has taken, as reflected in this latest book that we'll talk about tonight, this time a nonfiction work in his Secret Machines series, Gods, Men, and War. I finished it today. It is not what I expected. It's not what you expected. It's not what anyone thought was coming next. It's huge in its scope. It's sweeping in its reach. I don't know if I could call it inspirational, but it is motivational. That's how I reacted anyway. So coming up in just a couple of minutes, Tom DeLonge. He'll be here all 4 hours, as I said. We will save some time in the final hour for your calls. And joining us in hour 2 is Tom's co-author, Peter Levenda, who has written about esoteric mysteries and secret societies for many years, has been a guest on Coast. He's a scholar of the unknown. Should be a lot of fun. Webmaster Lex and I have put together our usual assortment of items and oddities. It's called Naps News. You can find it on the Coast website. We posted a couple of stories that relate to our overall themes tonight. One about a unified theory of weirdness, the kind of thing I've talked about a bunch of times on the program. Another about efforts to photograph a black hole. There's a scientific paper about contact with non-human intelligence, and a criticism of Tom DeLonge from a former guest on this program, Robbie Graham, who fired some shots across the bow. If you read only one story in Naps News tonight, I hope it's the one about the remarkable effort by some people in Iowa to save bees. The people there put aside 1,000 acres, and they're going to leave it alone. They're going to let flowers grow, let the soil heal, let animals return, let bees be bees, in hopes of regenerating bee populations, because, you know, without bees, there's no us. At least there's no civilized us. With that, let's assume the position. You know the drill. Bring in the dog and cat. Make a comfy spot for them near you. Put on a pot of joe. Make it strong tonight. Maybe something extra in the glass. No, don't cook any Spam. That's the wrong vibe. Slip into those jammies, the special ones tonight, and the fluffy slippers. Toss a log on the fire. Plop down in that Barca-lounger. Turn down the lights and turn up the radio, because we're ready to rumble. In a moment, Tom DeLonge, Secret Machines. I'm George Knapp, and this is Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back. You know, I'm not part of Secret Machines or Tom's organization or his company To the Stars, but over the last year, maybe this is true for some of you too. I don't know how many times in the past 12 months I've ended up defending Tom DeLonge in conversations with colleagues of mine or listeners or just people who write to me out of the blue, teeing off. People have it all figured out. They know he's being led down a path or making it up, or he's just in it to make money, or all the above. I think we here at Coast feel like we've been part of the ride since it was several times Tom has been here. He's grown as he's pursued this topic. A year ago, he laid out his plan, told us about his group of advisors trying to help tell the story about UFOs and larger mysteries. And since that interview almost a year ago, Tom's been in headlines all over the world, but for reasons that maybe he didn't expect. It has been a wild ride. can't imagine what it's been like for him, but he's persevered, and we've all been waiting for an update, and that time has arrived. For those of you who did not hear the previous interviews, Tom is an award-winning producer, author, platinum recording artist, and entrepreneur from San Diego. Best known as the co-founder and lead vocalist, guitarist for Blink-182 and his other band Angels and Airwaves. He sold about 25 million records. He's built a couple of other technology and lifestyle companies. And he's created this multimedia franchise under the production company To the Stars, music, books, film, and merchandise. His current franchise is called Secret Machines, a technological thriller series based on true events revolving around UFOs, guided by a team of top political and military advisors, real people that adhere to the essential facts and science behind the events accurately. The newest edition in this project is called Gods, Men, and War. It's been released, I think, today or yesterday. Welcome back to the program, Tom DeLonge. Tom, sounds like you've been slacking.
I know. I haven't really been doing much. You make me sound much more important than I am when you read off all those things together. That's
my job. That's what I do here. I don't know if there are any sensitivities here, but I got to ask about the events of the last year. You came here a year ago and you outlined sort of your plan, and then the WikiLeaks things happened. I sent you a note on the day that it happened. I said, hey, your name is in this stuff. It's leaking out. These emails that you had sent to John Podesta. And suddenly you're on the cover of the Wall Street Journal, on political programs all over the world. That's not what you had in mind, is it?
No. And I remember when I first met all those advisors, I remember that I was telling them I'm signing up for this. I'm signing up to have people take shots at me thinking that I'm lying and thinking that I was going out there and pretending that I was more important, that I was. I mean, I knew that I was going to kind of throw myself into the fire, but I signed up for it, and I told them, and everyone understood that I was going to go out there and say, look, I can't tell you who these people are, but I can tell you what they want you to know. And the crazy thing is I was telling the truth to everybody, and I don't think people believed it. But I'm sitting here at my desk one day, and I had this email just pings me, like it just pops up on my screen, and it says, I'm so-and-so with the Wall Street Journal. There's some emails in the WikiLeaks dump about UFOs. And it's got your name and phone number and email and all this stuff or whatever. But, do you have any comment? And I just, at that moment, it felt like someone just put a dagger right through my chest. It literally stole the breath from me. And I was so scared. I mean, I was scared, not like, oh, damn, this, people figured it out, like scared, meaning I'm dealing with national security issues, and the biggest, and some very, very important people. And there was only one rule. The only rule was don't let the cat out of the bag of who these people are. And then who would have guessed that I would have been involved with that stuff,
Well, you couldn't guess that John Podesta's email would be hacked, that's for sure. I mean, this is a pre-Podesta WikiLeaks hack. You'd figure that Hillary Clinton, their emails would be secure.
Yeah, and it's crazy because everyone's writing in these articles that Tom DeLonge is talking to one of the leaders of the Democratic Party. No, actually, I was talking to a guy that was senior advisor to the president at the time. It wasn't actually much to do with Hillary Clinton. It was much bigger than that at the moment, and. The worst thing about this is I mean, the worst thing about it is it's like a big valve that's shut, and I was in complete panic mode and cleanup mode. It was just unreal. I remember I have someone in my life that's another very important person, and he just had to talk me off the cliff for like 3 hours straight. I was literally on the road driving up to another place to give a big update to another very important person, and that happened right before I left my office to drive up there, and it was just, I literally pulled off the road and had to talk to this other guy and just go, what do I do? What do I do? You know, and it was a big deal. It's a big deal. I can't get into too many specifics, but it was a big deal.
Well, here was a reaction that I had. The first conversation we had is that, yeah, it's bad. It's going to hurt you, and we can get into whatever details you want or as far as you want to go. But it also helped you in the sense that all those people who are saying, Tom's making this up. Nobody in a sensitive position is going to give this kind of information or share any perspective with a rock star. Doesn't matter how famous he is. But in fact, that's exactly what happened, and those emails proved it.
Yeah, and people have to realize, I keep telling them, like, they keep calling me a rock star, you know, which is cool. I get it. You know, that's kind of how they know me, but that's not why they were working with me. It has nothing to do with it. It was because I knew my material. It was because I had a plan and I had a way to communicate to a much larger audience in a nuanced way. And then I was executing and along the way. I actually was doing everything I said I would do, and it was good. And on top of all that stuff, I was very respectful about everything. I treated it very formally, and I was modest. You know, when I went in there, I wasn't like pounding down the pavement, acting as though I'm some type of savior to this topic, because truthfully, I was in there really scared. I was scared the whole time because I knew the enormity of what I was dealing with, and I know a lot about this stuff now, and the stuff I know about this subject matter that is not out there in the mainstream kind of ufology world is it's a scary mess, you know, and there are some good points to it, but I've lost sleep over stuff that I've been briefed on, you know, and I thought I knew it all, you know, 20 years of studying this stuff. There's you know, there's really good reason why all this stuff isn't out, and these guys are busy. And just because I'm the first guy to come out and call it as it is, you know, which is these guys are doing very hard, dangerous work on this stuff, and that's why they're not stopping everything they're doing to come over and make sure we all understand it while we're driving to Starbucks to get our coffee and go away for Memorial Day weekend. You know, it's like we have no idea. We just have no idea what they're dealing with, and they're busy. So,
well, we're gonna cover it tonight. Before we leave this, and I don't want to add salt to the wound. I'm not going to mention the names, but in these emails, this exchange you have with Podesta, what comes out are the names of people that had been working with you or agreed to work with you for a time. And they're real, legit people. They're in important positions. And as the emails, the trail, and I know you don't want to get into it, but it's out in the public arena, the trail of information notes that there was this meeting, that there was a discussion, that it was ongoing for a while. And I can only imagine that there has been fallout in your group. Again, I don't know how far you want to go with that, but I can imagine.
Well, there were many discussions. People need to understand that there wasn't just one. You know, this is a year and a half of doing solid work. Yeah, you know, I can't really get into all that stuff. At the end of the day, you know, it was an illegal hack, and it was something that not only probably really affected the outcome of the presidential election, but it really affected the outcome of some subject matter that can change the world itself. So, but things are still a go. And when you say fallout, I was really fearful that I was going to have quite a lot of that, and I didn't. It just kind of it's just picture yourself kind of driving 100 miles an hour down a freeway, and the freeway splits off into a new direction, but it's still, you know, going to take you somewhere special, but it's just not what you intended, you know.
Well, you know, it speaks to your perseverance for sure, because I can imagine that, you know, there have been things like that in previous efforts, people who hadn't gone as far as you had, who were completely derailed. They were thrown off, they were stopped, and you're still going. And we're going to get into some of the details about what you're doing, but in general, though, I mean, just seeing your name and likeness and things on the front covers of these major newspapers. It was weird. It was really weird. I'm
Yeah.
sure it was a lot weirder for you.
I know it is weird. The hardest thing is for people that don't know much about this subject matter. They think it's weird. They're like, oh, why did this guy leave a gigantic rock band to go hunt down little green men? He's out of his mind. He's crazy. He's just one of those weird kind of, was Shirley MacLaine, wasn't she the actress that everyone thought just went off the deep end? She was at the Oscars tonight, which was funny, but there's we're the highway's littered with artists that have gone off the deep end, but that's not what this subject is.
We'll get into that. We're going to get into it on the other side. Jimi Hendrix is telling us from 1968 about a little mysticism in his life. We all need a little mysticism. Voodoo Child. Back in a moment with Tom DeLonge. Frank Zappa and his 1974 homage to a shaman named Mystery Man. The name of the song is Cosmic Debris. Cosmic spelled with a K. Not an accident that we chose that song. We're going to talk about the role of shaman in the overall picture that Tom has explored in the new book, Gods, Man, and War, part of his Secret Machine series. A couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of reaching out to him on behalf of another party. They had wanted to see if he would accept the award as the UFO Researcher of the Year. It was put on by Open Minds organization, which produces the world's largest UFO gathering, the UFO Congress, each year in Phoenix. And Tom was named and sent a video greeting, but I think it completely caught him by surprise and caught many in the world of ufology by surprise as well. We'll talk about that, where his project is heading, and some big picture stuff coming up in just a moment here on Coast to Coast AM. Tom, you were surprised by this UFO Researcher of the Year award, right?
Oh yeah, no, I never, I never thought that I would get something like that. That was really interesting. It was cool. I'm flattered,
And yet the ufology folks, some of them are your harshest critics. They say, good Lord, this guy is naive. He's being led down the path. It's clearly disinformation. There's no way anyone in those positions of authority are going to tell the truth. What do you say to that?
It's funny. There's a couple. I know a few UFO researchers, some of the most famous of all time, and I remember that this particular person was having a lot of trouble with kind of some of the information that I was talking about. And I remember at one point I had to look at him and say, you're the odd man out here, and I'm sorry that it has to be that way, but I'm dealing with such and such people from such and such places, and I did explain some detail at that conversation, and they are all saying the same thing. And I remember that person just stared at me, and it was so hard for them to accept that. And then I went back to some of the people that I knew, the important people, and I remember saying, they're having trouble with some of this stuff. And there was a chuckle, and it says, look, you're dealing with paradigm shifting subject matter. You're dealing with stuff that's going to turn people's worlds upside down, and there's no way around it. And there's just no way around it. And that came from the important ones. So it's true, though. It's true. So I know it's hard for people to accept it.
When you were here last year, and in conversations that we've had, I mean, the idea of disclosure was on your mind. I mean, I think at one point that's what you hope to eventually get their side of it, but to sort of tell the public what the big picture is, assuming that you could find folks on the inside who were sympathetic to that. Is disclosure, well, we'll get into that when we get into the book, but is disclosure of some kind still on the agenda?
Yes, and I think I gotta clarify that too, because disclosure is such a weighted word, and everybody expects it to be a very specific thing. The president comes out and they said, "Okay, now we're going to tell you." So that's something that people have to kind of stop thinking is going to be the case. What was on my mind was very simple. I came to the conclusion that the UFO issue was not a good issue. And I came to the conclusion that there was a lot of work going towards suppressing it and giving it quite a big pushback, not only just from our country, but the human race as a whole, and many countries working together. So I went into these guys, and early on, I remember there was this whole thing where I knew they probably were like, okay, let's tell everybody everything. And then they get to the 99-yard line and they say, whoa, we can't do this. We can't do this. It's going to down religions. It's going to down the world economy. There's going to be martial law and all this stuff. And so I had in my mind, and what I really felt was the case, was they were either going to do it all or nothing. And I kind of came in and said, okay, get your minds off this all or nothing thing. How about we go up the middle and we spend a period of years laying it out in such a way that it's an elevated prestige kind of conversation with these feature films and these kind of historical fiction, science fiction books. And then we will intersperse nonfiction works, documentaries, and books in between them. And if we do that, it will create enough conversation over time where people will start to understand why we did what we did. Because I was really after getting people to not be so cynical about government. And I'm not talking about politicians. I mean, obviously all the politicians, they're probably all nuts. I'm just saying these career patriotic guys that put their lives on the line every single day to deal with the stuff that we don't have to deal with. And hey, I think it's going to work out wonderfully, and it's going to take a little bit of time, but I'm still on that mission.
You know that there are a lot of people that figure, well, look, if you're going to make them appear sympathetic, if you're going to tell their side of it or explain why this cover-up, I'm using air quotes around it, has been going on for so long, then clearly you're being a tool. So maybe share with us, what is their agenda? Why would they work with you? Why would they release information in incremental bits and pieces?
Well, I think, I believe, and this is me speaking from just myself, I think that information was being released in incremental pieces for a very long time. And I'm not, the one that ever decided that or made that happen. I mean, this has been going on for a long period of time. But for myself, I think it's the right time and place. I remember I was at NASA and I was having a meeting with one of the top people there, one of the top 5 people there. And I made everyone leave the office, and I said, hey, I just want to let you know what I'm getting ready to do. And I laid out the entire plan. And this person looked at me, took a deep breath, and said, this is a very, very good time for this, or it's a very, very good time for this. And I remember that, just staring at this person going, okay, so something's already in the works, it seemed like to me, So I think what's happened, in my view, is that they've been dripping it along the way, but this has nothing to do with using me as a mouthpiece or me, thinking the government is something it's not. Truthfully, people have to get their heads around that when it first happened, everyone was caught off guard, everyone was fearful, and there was extreme secrecy because they just had to figure it out. They didn't know what it was. They didn't know how to deal with it, and it was so much more powerful than we were. So we created this big master program to push back, to outwit it. And I think we're at the time frame now where we finally have our boxing gloves on and we're able to punch back a little bit. So I think they are now ready to have a conversation because they have a much grander understanding of what it is, and we're not so defenseless. And I think that is what's going on here. It's just a different time, and we kind of got our act together.
So it's a good time for this, as they said, in part because we're in a better posture to deal with it. But is there anything else? Is there something on the other side, something imminent? Is there a reason why it may be we need to get on with it right now?
I don't think so. And I think that it's more or less if you look at what's happening with the open access to space and all the corporations that are going up there right now, you got the Elon Musks of the world. There's 80 backlogged missions to the moon. And people are putting CubeSats and rovers and Mars and the backside of the moon, and now there's another 60 to 80 satellites going up, grabbing full spectrum, data all over the Antarctic and stuff. So what's going to happen here, regardless if they want it or not, everyone's going to have access to these locations and start seeing stuff that they probably didn't want any of us to see. So they don't really have a choice, So once Pepsi puts a CubeSat around the moon and sees a structure, what's going to happen? So I think I think that they're looking for a way out. a way to have the conversation. But I've always said that the secrecy is an issue of the corporation, and the corporation of the government, if you call it that. It's just it's built into the DNA of the company. If the U.S. government was a company, and so it's just you go in and get work done, and then you leave and retire, but it's always going to be secret. They have these things called skiffs that are these rooms that are built a certain way where you can't have phones in there. They have to be wired a certain way. They have to be completely airtight. There's all these. It's just how the DoD works. You have to get them certified by the Department of Defense. And these are the things that are deep within the aerospace companies and the Area 51s of the world. It's pretty fantastic secret stuff. But when you're in there and you talk about something, that conversation can never leave that room. That room literally owns that conversation. And if you were to leave, say you worked at like Boeing in one of their classified facilities and you talked about something in one of those rooms, you can't go get a job at another classified facility and talk about that same conversation. It cannot happen, or else you'll go to jail for life. That's just how the corporate rules work, and so that's part of the issue here. Is just how the secrecy works. It's really difficult for any of these people to come up with a way to talk to young adults about this stuff.
Can you? How much can you share with us about the structure of the secrecy, or what we would call and have called cover-up? What I mean by that is, can you say that there is a central repository of UFO stuff, or there's an MJ-12 that controls all this stuff, or is it more like dispersed all over the place and no one is really quite sure? It's more like in stovepipes. No one is really quite sure of the big picture, or at least very few.
I think it's always going to be in stovepipes and spread out. I think there's a lot of people that are very passionate about this subject matter. I think when you look at the government as a whole, the intelligence community is, this gigantic kind of, it's like Apple. And then you look at the DoD and it's like Google, and they're both huge, and they both have infinite resources, and they both have their own kind of paramilitary side, intelligence side, technology side, R&D side, and they all do kind of the same thing. And when they collect their own information and they create their own programs and they follow it all down the rabbit hole, I think the military probably has more assets in some ways, obviously, because they can actively go up there and target something and try and get their hands on it. I don't think everyone has that kind of capability. But your question is it all centralized? I don't. It's a hard question to answer because I think it is, but I do think that there's multiple games in town. I don't think. And I'll say that there's multiple games in town across the globe. So it's not like there's only one group where it all goes up to a very few men. I think there's a few versions of that, and there might even be a couple of those versions in our own country. So a part of the problem was when I came out with the book. At first, it created a few shockwaves in a few of those stovepipes because the stovepipe I was involved with they don't communicate to the other ones. So
not everyone was on board.
Well, they're not allowed to know. I mean, it's just how it works. So the way security classifications work is it's a horizontal architecture. So you get your security clearance and you go up like a level, but then you move sideways and you get cleared for programs that matter for you to be involved with. If you have no reason or anything to offer a program, you don't learn about it, and you can't even acknowledge that this special access program exists. So you could be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, but if you have nothing to offer a particular SAP, a special access program, that no one can even tell you that you're the boss, but they can't even tell you that it exists, and that's just how the corporate rules work.
I mentioned about the movie Arrival, and it sort of touches on the same kind of themes in the course of this film. If you've seen it, other countries are getting bits and pieces of information, and they suddenly become proprietary about it, jealously guarding it, shut it all off all communication seemed like a very realistic scenario. So from what you've learned along the way, I mean, there's secrets within our government kept from other parts of our government, maybe multiple levels of secrecy, and then other people have pieces of the puzzle as well, other countries.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a lot of times these things are completely warranted. I mean, if there was a nuclear weapon that was snuck into New York and we didn't know where it was and we knew it can hurt a lot of people, we're not going to go out and tell everybody about it. And they're not going to go alarm, all the branches of government. They're probably going to call a few guys that can help from this agency or that agency, and it's just the way it works. But I think in the long run, for people, what I always wanted people to understand was this issue also does have some really amazing things about it, where countries were working together in a beautiful way on this, with countries that you think that we would never get along with. I mean, even currently. So it really is kind of cliche in that way, where you're like, oh, it's the one topic that can pull the world together. Well, it did. It kept the Cold War from turning hot, as I was told.
Do we have technology from somewhere else? And if we have it, do other countries have it?
I tell people to read the books and think about it. That's always been my personal view, and that's I'll leave it there.
Read the books. Some of the people who have taken shots at you, and I don't really even get this, but they object to the fact that To the Stars sells merchandise. You're selling shirts and artwork and things like that, and selling books. And I don't understand it, because I don't know anybody who's really in the field of ufology who's writing books and giving them away. I mean, I know there are some, they give them away, but in general, people write books and they want to be paid for it, not to get rich, because nobody gets rich at this stuff, but because they want to be able to afford to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. I gave away a free record one time, and it's very expensive. It's like it was digital, and we were downloading about 4 albums in full resolution per second, and I think it cost like $100,000 or $200,000 just to cover the electricity and the bandwidth, So it's even expensive to give away free stuff. But people have to also realize that, I started my company as what I was going to be doing, after leaving my band. I was getting into directing films and producing films, and I'm doing one this year for one of my books that I put out. But really, my big pitch with Secret Machines was, I thought in my head, I thought this really, through before I went over to meet important people, but I was thinking, what is the biggest thing that can happen? If the president's not going to come out, if we're not going to have congressional hearings, what is the single biggest way to communicate something? Well, I said, well, $100 million film with $100 million in marketing and an international release. Well, that's pretty damn big. I don't think there's anything bigger than that. But how do I get that done? Well, I have to, the way Hollywood works is you have to build a story from the ground up. You have to have a book that's popular. You have to have a brand that people understand. And they're not really making movies anymore. They're making franchises. That's why you keep seeing like Marvel's Avengers and Batman, and you kind of keep Star Wars. It's such a risk to make a movie. It's so expensive that the whole kind of industry has really changed to only want to put out things that are going to be around for a long period of time. And so Secret Machines is a franchise for a few different reasons, but also because that's how it's going to get made into a movie and a series of movies. It's not only what my plan was to teach people over a period of time, but it's also what works in Hollywood. So to do that, yeah, you got to sell things and you got to build things, and it costs, like I said, we're planning on $200 million being put to task by the time we make these films in the next few years.
I mean, you want to be able to keep the work going. Barring a landing on the White House lawn, you'd like to be able to keep a roof over your head and still be able to pay bills and do this research. Absolutely, and I forgive me for what I'm going to say now, because it brings a lot more questions than needed at this moment. But I have mentioned that there's going to be an announcement, and there's going to be one, and I think people will start to understand
some of the things I've been working on and in regards to this and a lot of other things. I think it's going to be a very exciting thing, but part of it is to create a perpetual motion machine for this subject matter with infinite resources to get the job done. So I'm excited to bring that out, but I can't say much about it.
People are going to think I planned this, but we now need to go to a break right after Tom says there's going to be a big announcement coming. In a moment, we're going to be joined by Peter Levenda. He's the co-author of the new book. He's been on Coast to Coast before and is very learned in these areas and mystical areas and conspiracy theories, and he'll be joining us in just a moment. So stick around. Much more to come here on Coast to Coast AM. And this is a song, by the way, that I think Tom knows.